Okay, let's just get right into it. What if the entire political map in Australia was being redrawn right before our eyes? I mean, a shift so big that it could completely reshape our government. And it's all centered around a political party that, well, almost nobody saw coming back this strong.
And that leads us to the big question, really. This isn't just some wild what-if scenario. We're seriously asking, based on some pretty shocking new data, could the party that's supposed to be the main alternative to the government just get completely replaced? It sounds nuts, but the numbers are pointing to it being a real possibility.
And look, this isn't just hype. We're seeing data that suggests a massive shakeup is happening. A recent Sky News feature really dug into this, and they've put some hard numbers on the table that are, well, they're genuinely eye-popping. So let's break it all down. To really get what's going on here, you have to start with the raw data. This is where the whole story begins, with the polls that are sending shockwaves through the political world. So take a look at this. These are the numbers everyone's talking about. According to a recent Sky News/YouGov poll, One Nation is sitting at a 24% primary vote. Now remember, your primary vote is just your number one pick on the ballot. And that 24%, it puts them ahead of the coalition, the traditional Liberal National Alliance, and only 5 points behind the current Labour government. 5 points. That is a huge deal. And this really shows you just how fast this whole thing has happened. I mean, at the last election in 2025, One Nation got just 6% of the primary vote. Now, you fast forward to just February 2026, and in the Sky News Pulse poll, that number had skyrocketed to 28%. This isn't a slow build, it's a political explosion. Nobody would have predicted a trajectory like this a year ago. So, what would this actually look like in Parliament? Well, Sky News' chief election analyst, Tom Connell, crunched the numbers. If these polling figures actually happened on election day, One Nation could snag more than 20 seats. That's enough for them to become the official opposition. We're not talking about a small party holding the balance of power here. We're talking about them becoming the main alternative government.
But numbers like these don't just pop up out of nowhere. So that leads to the next obvious question. Who are the people driving this surge? The numbers tell us what's happening, but it's the people behind them that tell us the why.
And this quote here from National Affairs correspondent Jonathan Lee really gets to the heart of it. I think the stereotype a lot of people have of a One Nation supporter is being completely challenged by what journalists are actually seeing on the ground at their events. So who is actually showing up? Well, when reporters went out with Pauline Hanson and Barnaby Joyce, they saw young people, young families, and maybe most surprisingly, even migrants showing up to voice their support. This paints a picture of a much broader, more diverse coalition of voters than the party has ever really had before. Okay, so we've got the numbers and we've got a better picture of the voters. But what does all of this actually mean for the balance of power in Canberra? How does a surge in the polls turn into actual political clout? Right off the bat, a lot of people wonder if they'd form some kind of super coalition with the traditional conservative parties. Well, Pauline Hanson has been absolutely crystal clear on this. When she was asked, her response was simple: not interested. The party's plan is to stay totally independent and judge every piece of legislation on its own merit, with no formal deals or cabinet positions. And the impact isn't just in the lower house either. You have to look at the Senate. A longtime strategist, Glenn Drury, is predicting One Nation could actually win a Senate seat in every single state. Right now, they have 4. If he's right, they could end up with 9 seats, more than doubling their presence and completely changing the game in the upper house. So why is all this happening right now? This chart gives us some pretty important clues. When voters are this worried about basic things like the cost of living and the housing crisis, it creates a huge appetite for change. And right there, alongside those big economic fears, is immigration. It's this mix of issues that creates the perfect environment for a party seen as an outsider. And it's on immigration where One Nation is really gaining traction. And here's the statistic that really makes you stop and think. According to that same YouGov poll, an incredible 29% of voters now trust One Nation the most when it comes to immigration. That's more than any other party. At a time when trust in politicians is low, for one party to have such a clear lead on a huge national issue, well, that's more than just a poll number. That's a movement. But hang on. Before we get completely carried away with all of this, we have to inject a pretty serious dose of reality here. As dramatic as these numbers are, a poll is just a snapshot in time. It's not a crystal ball. And there are some really big factors that could change this whole picture. First, let's just do this simple math. Even if One Nation pulls off this historic result of getting over 20 seats, that's still a really long way from the 76 seats you need to form a government all by yourself. So even if they do incredibly well, there's a real ceiling on their power.
And then you've got the biggest wild card in all of Australian politics, our preferential voting system. See, how you rank your second, third, and fourth choices can totally change the final result. These preferences have a funny way of shuffling the deck in ways that a simple primary vote poll just can't predict. And that could end up helping or hurting the party on election day.
Which really leaves us with the ultimate question, doesn't it? Is this incredible surge just a temporary protest vote from fed-up Australians that'll eventually fade away? Or are we actually watching the beginning of a permanent realignment, where a third major force becomes a lasting feature of our political landscape? The data has certainly posed the question. Only time and the voters can give us the answer.